at 28 off the bench. Clippers guard Russell Westbrook has surgery Monday on his fractured left hand. The Clippers medical staff is hopeful that Westbrook will be back in April before the start of the Western Conference playoffs. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Climate is king.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that caring for the community means caring about the climate. You might have heard that we announced a pretty bold 12-month, $2 million campaign to do 4 things. Increase climate literacy, turn up the volume on communities of color in the climate conversation, connect everyday people with the resources they need to survive and thrive, and highlight frontline climate justice crusaders of color throughout this year. KBLA Talk 1580 will be bringing you insightful interviews on all of our shows to help raise your climate IQ. Each quarter this year, we will also be hosting free climate events in various communities throughout the city with food, fun, and forward-thinking conversations. Thanks to partners like LADWP, Metro, Caltrans, the Sierra Club, the California Community Foundation, the California Endowment, AQMD, MWD, and more. You'll also be hearing more about a couple of national town halls broadcasting live from Los Angeles, to which you will be invited. And we'll be rolling out a robust social media campaign on all our platforms, as well as an outdoor media campaign, all designed to educate, enlighten, and empower you in our fight for climate justice.
We want cleaner air.
Caring about the community means caring about the climate. At KBLA Talk 1580, we believe that we really can change the world if we care enough. 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 If we care enough.
1, 2, 3, go! Ha ha! Let's keep it going. I'm gonna try to keep it coming. Things ain't always smooth, oh wait. But I'll be alright as long as I can find the groove. Yes, I will, yeah. Somehow I know that I can make it. You seem to like my style. Now, don't you worry, I'm gonna be around a while. Yes, I will. I'm just happy to see you talk to me back in style again.
Live from historic Leimert Park in Los Angeles, California, I'm Tavis Smiley, and I'm so glad to see you and me back in stride again. Before we get started with today's show, let me invite you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Real Tavis Smiley and get updates on X, that's formerly Twitter, at Tavis Smiley. By the way, should you miss any part of today's program or want to catch up on previous shows, you can always visit thetavisSmileyShow.com. That's thetavisSmileyShow.com or wherever you get your podcast and listen to the Tavis Smiley podcast version of this live program at your leisure. Another great show on tap for you today. In our second hour, 2 conversations. Up first, we'll speak with the man who led the House impeachment of then-President Donald Trump, Congressman Adam Schiff, who's on the ballot today in California as a Democratic candidate to fill the seat of the late Senator Dianne Feinstein. On this program yesterday, we talked to who? Katie Porter and Barbara Lee. It's a tight race. And today, the front runner in this race, in fact, Adam Schiff, is our guest at the top of hour 2, an all-important seat in the U.S. Senate. Then we'll be joined in that second hour by astrophysicist Dr. Hakeem Oluseyi. Not a whole lot of black astrophysicists hanging around. And so when you hear the backstory of this particular black astrophysicist, Dr. Hakeem Oluseyi, and how he navigated his way from the streets to the stars, I mean, it's quite a story. I mean, drug addiction and all the other parts of the story that you'll find fascinating, and yet he ends up being a brilliant Stanford-trained astrophysicist. It's an amazing story. You'll hear the story of Dr. Hakeem Oluseyi when we get to hour 2. In our third hour today, fresh off a 9-month arena tour with Cat Williams, the original bad girl of comedy is back live in studio today in our final hour. Lunell Ain't nothing funny about Election Day, but we'll get our laugh on anyway in the third and final hour of our program today. Speaking of Election Day, let's commence today's show talking Super Tuesday politics with LA Times columnist Erica D. Smith. Erica, good to see you. How are you?
I'm good.
It's good to have you on the program. I'm glad we got an hour, a whole lot to talk about here on Super Tuesday. I guess I want to start with this as the first question, which is whether or not Super Tuesday, you've been around for a while, and I've been around for a while, and there was a time when Super Tuesday was a really, really big deal. I'm not so sure it's the big deal. Let me just unpack this for a second. Super Tuesday, 16 states who have some kind of primary or caucus today. That's a lot of states. There is no day on the election calendar where this many states get action, and particularly a state like California. The biggest and bluest of all of them, right? But Super Tuesday back in the day used to mean something, and I'm not so sure that it has the weight, the gravitas that it once had for a lot of reasons, but particularly in this election, because everything seems at this point to be a foregone conclusion, if you feel me. So does it feel big? I mean, it's Super Tuesday. It feels like Small Tuesday, not the Super Tuesday that it used to be, but that's just me. Give me your take.
Yeah, I definitely think we should almost rename it at this point. It does not feel like it's very super at all. I think the last I checked this morning, I think only in California about 14% of voters had returned their ballots. And this part of this is the function of the way that we vote now. We all get our ballots in the mail. And so we've been having our ballots sitting on our counters, or potentially could have turned them in days and weeks ago. And we won't know the vote totals for several days because people can vote up until today, and it's going to take some more days to count them. So it doesn't feel like this big wait for it, we're all going to go out and vote. It feels very much more kind of anticlimactic. And I think, to your broader point with this year, most of the races have been divided. We know we're getting Biden, we know we're getting Trump. The polling is pretty clear in the Senate race, but things can still happen in there. But What's your read? And there are a number of answers to this, and we can walk through some of them, I suspect. What's your read to the low turnout? Every person I've spoken to on this program, and I've not done a whole lot of this, on my home station in L.A., KBLA Talk 1580, our morning show host has been talking to everybody. And as a matter of fact, I haven't had a chance to tell her this yet. She's probably listening right now. Her name is Dominique DePrima, and she hosts our morning show. So yesterday, I was looking at some numbers that I get every month. So every month, I get numbers of our podcast downloads. And the month of February, and we've done quite well. We're a startup station, here in L.A. We're 2.5 years in, and our podcast numbers are huge every month. I mean, it's blown away by the number of people all around the world who download our podcast. I haven't even told my staff this yet, so here I am saying it on the radio. But our podcast numbers last month went through the roof. I mean, tens of thousands of podcast downloads. The number was, I'll mention the number later to my staff, but the number was massive, and that number was driven in part by the fact that we were the only station in Los Angeles that was interviewing every candidate for every office. If you're running in L.A. County, you were invited to KBLA to be interviewed about why you were running. And we posted all of those interviews, one by one, all those conversations on our web portal and all of other platforms. And the download numbers were just impressive to me. So on the one hand, I was kind of excited by the fact that people are actually checking this out, and they want to hear these candidates talk about their positions. I'm trying to juxtapose that, though, with the low turnout that I'm seeing in all of these stories. So when we come forward, I'm going to see if Erica can help me understand why our podcast numbers are through the roof and why the turnout is so low. I can't make sense of it. We'll talk about that and a great deal more. It is Super Tuesday, Small Tuesday, not as Super Tuesday as it used to be, whatever you want to call it. I'm delighted to commence our program today in this first hour with Erica D. Smith, columnist for the LA Times. You're listening to her right now, and I'm glad about it, on Tavis Smiley.
This is getting good. Yeah, man. Tavis Smiley continues when we come forward.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, And I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
This is Los Angeles County Supervisor Holly Mitchell, and today I'd like to talk to you about a leader who stands out in the race for Los Angeles Unified School District Board District 1, Charlotte Kendi Newbill. Charlotte's dedication to our schools isn't just professional, it's personal. As a lifelong educator and a mother, she knows the stakes. With her at the helm, we can look forward to reduced class sizes, safer schools, and innovative programs that truly meet the needs of all our students. Charlotte Kendi Newbill has the experience. Please join me in supporting Charlotte. Let's make sure our children's education is in the hands of someone who truly cares. Vote Charlotte Kendi Newbill for LAUSD Board District 1. Our kids deserve the best.
Paid for by helping empowered individuals reach Success Political Action Committee. This advertisement was not authorized or paid for by a candidate for this office or a committee controlled by a candidate for this office.
Do you support public education? More than 38,000 educators at United Teachers Los Angeles do too. Together, we have fought for a better public education for our students and communities, and having you on our side has been essential in our fight for better public schools. Together, we will continue to work for public schools with green spaces, more mental health staff, smaller class sizes at every grade level, and a higher investment in the Black Student Achievement Plan. We are UTLA, and you make us stronger.
It's never been faster or easier to be a voter. Look for your vote by mail ballot in the mail. Fill it in and drop it off at a mailbox on your way to work, on your daily walk, or when dropping the kids off at school. Save time and vote early. Make a plan to vote at plan.lavote.gov. That's plan.lavote.gov. Brought to you by the Los Angeles County Registrar.
Ready to re-examine your assumptions and expand your inventory of ideas? More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
More of Tavis Smiley and Erica D. Smith, columnists for the Los Angeles Times. As we talk about Super Tuesday, in case you've just tuned in, we both agree that it ain't as super as it used to be. There's still 16 states that are doing primaries or caucuses today, so it's a big day in that regard. But in many ways, it is a foregone conclusion. It is anticlimactic, which raises a couple questions for me. Let me start with this question. I've been in California a little bit longer than you've been in California, but you've been here long enough and a columnist long enough up north and here in Southern California, two different papers, to understand what I'm about to say. For so long, those of us on the West Coast have been shanked politically on election night. You know where I'm going, right? Mm-hmm. Because on presidential election years, they tend to call the race oftentimes before the polls have closed in California. They've gotten a little bit better about that. Mm-hmm. But in so many ways, we see all these trends. We see how California is less important oftentimes. I mean, maybe this year different, 4 years ago different, because it's a close and tight race between Trump and Biden then, likely a close and tight race between Trump and Biden this time around. But what say you about just being on the West Coast as we are? This program, of course, is heard across the country, but we're based in L.A. And we get shanked every election year because the country just basically shuts down and declares winners before we get a chance to even close our polls.
I mean, yeah, we're so overwhelmingly Democratic here, and not just in California. I mean, Washington State, Oregon,
West Coast.
Yeah, I mean, that it's kind of a foregone conclusion when it comes to how we're going to vote in national elections. I mean, even with the Senate race, we see, the likelihood of a Republican getting in is pretty low, ultimately. And so there's kind of this sense, I think, even from voters that, what difference does it make if I vote during the primary, because we already know what's going to happen, and this is true with the presidential race in particular. The odd thing this time around with Trump, I mean, there's a chance that we will award so many of the delegates that he needs almost to kind of put him over the top this time around. So it's as Democratic as we are, we could actually end up delivering to Trump the delegates he needs to basically clinch the Republican nomination. So,
and how ironic would that be?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I was talking earlier about this juxtaposition that I'm hoping you can help me with between the massive number of podcast downloads that we had. Let me just pause for a second. Because again, we're heard on stations across the country, and some of those stations they all serve black people, but some of them are actually black owned. I'm thinking now of WVON in Chicago. I'm thinking of WURD
in Philadelphia. I'm thinking of WBOK in New Orleans. So some of these stations, WOL in Washington, D.C. So many of these stations are black-owned. And so I want to just pause for a second here. I've said this many times, but now seems a propitious time to say it. Black media is more relevant and more necessary now than ever before. Why? I'm glad you asked. Because there's certain questions that don't get asked if we don't ask them. Certain issues that don't get raised if we don't raise them. Certain people that don't get profiled, who are doing great work, but they don't get profiled. If we, or Erica D. Smith in her column in the LA Times, doesn't profile them, they don't get profiled. And so there's a way in which, if not for the black media, our people are less informed. We are pleased in LA that for 2 consecutive years we have been deemed in a scientific survey the most trusted, the most credible, and the most reliable source for news for African Americans in Southern California. And we ain't but 2 years old. That happened the first year. My point is that if you build it and you focus and you serve them, they respond to that. They know you're giving them information they can't get anywhere else. Why am I saying that? It ain't just a shout out just necessarily to black media. It is to underscore the point that I made earlier, that our podcast downloads, I just saw last night, went through the roof in the month of February. It ain't just because of Black History Month. It's because we were the only station in Los Angeles that were interviewing all of the candidates for every office in LA County. And that made a difference to the audience because they couldn't get it anywhere else. I'm curious as to what happens when the LA Times, let me just pivot for a second. When the LA Times endorses candidates, what happens to your readership, your downloads, the engagement? I assume it goes through the roof.
Oh, it does. And it goes through the roof the closer you get to the election, because that's, the idea when we started having mail-in ballots is, it gives people time because people are working, they're raising their families to drop off their ballots. The reality is most people still vote the day of the election or the day before. And so we've seen traffic over the weekend, web traffic kind of spike in our endorsements, in our voter guides. I could just give people the basic information. But yes, absolutely. You guys are providing a service that is needed, particularly as there's been this retreat in local media.
Yeah, and if you want people of color to be engaged and involved in the process, then you have to give them the information that they need to make good choices on election day.
Absolutely.
Somebody in my office was telling me just this morning about the number of calls that we've been receiving where voters are asking us to do our own voter guide. And so they said, how should we respond to these callers? I said, tell them that we rooting for everybody black. Just tell them that. We interview everybody to give them a chance to be heard, but we're not trying to endorse people because you got black folk running against black folk.
Yeah.
We're giving them a platform to be heard. We're not like the LA Times where we're necessarily making endorsements. But my point is that people want to be led. They want to be helped. They want to be aided because there's so many people running. There's so many ballot initiatives. They need somebody to help sort that out, help them, help guide them through that process. I'm wondering whether or not part of the low turnout, which I'm working my way to, is in part based on the fact that there's so much stuff on the ballot. Yeah. I've been critical for a lot of years. You're the columnist. I'm curious as to your take. I don't know that I've actually seen you write about this. Maybe you did and I missed it. I read your stuff all the time. But I've been more and more critical. The older I get, the crankier I get, I guess. And I'm getting more and more critical of this whole ballot process, this referendum, ballot initiative. They call it different things in different states. But it's like, fool, why did we elect you? Why did we elect y'all? We elected y'all to deal with these issues. And oftentimes they punt on these issues, and then they end up kicking it back to us in some sort of ballot initiative that we need to vote on. And I'm not naive. Other times there are ballot initiatives that come from the people that I think are necessarily that are quite worthy, and maybe they should be on the ballot. But the point is, it's getting more and more. How do I'm saying is, on the one hand, we're getting more flexible, not as much as we should, but getting more flexible about how people can vote and when they can vote. But we're giving them a ballot that's like a science test these days. And I'm not so sure that doesn't impact the low turnout, low participation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. And, coincidentally, I actually wrote about this today, actually. So there
see,
you go.
That's why I haven't seen it yet. I got to get your column today. I haven't seen that one yet.
It's online. It's not directly about referendums, but it is about this idea that, our ballots are so complicated these days. And that in order to kind of get the result you want, you almost have to game the ballot. And this is really true when we're talking about like the open primary process or ranked choice voting, where you're like, well, I want to vote for this. I want this person to win, or I want politics to go further to the right or to the left. But if I vote for this candidate, then this candidate will happen. So it becomes almost like this game of chess. And I think that, to your point with the downloads, and I think to our web traffic, there's interest in the elections for sure. But I think that when people see the ballot, they're either just like, this is a lot to figure out, or it's just all just very exhausting. And I do think that gets reflected in the turnout. And it also provides for political campaigns and consultants who know how to like massage this process a little bit easier way for them to kind of like game the process in the favor of their candidate. So I think in the name of reform, we've almost made things more complicated for voters, and I think we're starting to see it in some cases in the turnout.
Speaking of gaming the ballot, you keep saying I'm trying to go one direction. You keep pulling me this way. It's okay. I believe in following the guest anyway because you keep saying brilliant stuff that makes me think. Speaking of gaming the ballot, I mentioned moments ago, 22 minutes ago, in fact, at the top of the show, that we will commence our second hour in conversation with Adam Schiff, who is the leading candidate at the moment, according to the polls, in California to win that Senate seat that's now being warmed by the black sister, LaFonza Butler, is the person Gavin Newsom picked. People around the country know this. There's a black woman in the Senate named LaFonza Butler from California. She's sitting there as a seat warmer until this election is held and we figure out who's going to get that seat. And so yesterday on this program, we talked to Katie Porter. It's the seat that Dianne Feinstein once had. She passed away, of course, in office. So Katie Porter was on yesterday. Barbara Lee was on yesterday. Adam Schiff, the front runner, will be the lead guest at the top of the next hour in about 40 minutes from now. And one of the things that Katie Porter said yesterday, and Barbara Lee intimated the same thing, Katie was really strong about it, is the way that Adam Schiff has gamed the ballot, to use your phrase, and you know where I'm going. So Adam Schiff doesn't really want to deal with Barbara Lee. He doesn't want to deal with Katie Porter. He wants to deal with Steve Garvey, the Republican, the former Dodger baseball great, because he thinks and believes and knows in California he can take Steve Harvey out. I said Steve Harvey yesterday. I said it again today. Not Steve Harvey, Steve Garvey. God help us if Steve Harvey's on the ballot. I don't know who's worse, Steve Harvey or Steve Garvey. It would not be a beautiful thing either way if I were running for U.S. Senate, Garvey or Harvey. But I'm trying to say Steve Garvey, the former baseball great for the Dodgers. So Schiff has basically run a campaign sort of pumping up this Republican, Steve Garvey, gaming the ballot to get Barbara Lee out the way, to get Katie Porter out the way so he can take on Steve Garvey. Now, on the one hand, that's brilliant strategy.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. You can't deny it. And, of course, he had $32 million to implement that strategy. It's brilliant strategy on the one hand, but it is gaming the ballot. It's no different than Democrats around the country. I've complained about this as well more frequently. They will literally put money behind a particular candidate who they know they don't want to be elected, but they put money behind candidate A to make sure candidate B or C doesn't make the runoff and make it more difficult for them. So they game the ballot, they game the system to get the candidate they want to run against in the general election if they can't pull it off in a primary. I'm not sure that's what you meant when you said game the ballot, but since you went there, it is. Well, let's talk about it then.
Yeah, I mean,
is it brilliant strategy or is it gaming the ballot?
I think it's both, actually.
Okay.
I mean, and I think the unfortunate result is that it increases voter apathy because voters look like, well, what difference can I make by voting? Because you've already gamed this to a point where we know who's going to be the person who's going to be elected, or it's going to come down to a much smaller choice of candidates. And so as voters, you're like, well, I can't really influence the process the way that I could have if everything was kind of really just go and vote for the candidate you think is best. And so I think that, Adam Schiff absolutely gamed the ballot in a way that, at least according to the polls, he's going to be in a two-person runoff with Steve Garvey, and he's going to more than likely win, and taking out, Katie Porter and Barbara Lee before that ever happens.
Yep. I asked this question yesterday of both Barbara Lee and Katie Porter. Katie Porter kind of talked around it. Barbara Lee went right at it. I said to her yesterday, that may very well be, Barbara Lee, the best answer to any question I've asked of any candidate during this entire election process. And I asked her whether or not she thought she was too progressive to be in the U.S. Senate. Even from a state like California that, we brand ourselves as being liberal and progressive. Trust me, I live here. We ain't that liberal. We ain't that progressive. And neither is Gavin Newsom, our governor. I don't care what they tell you. They're really not that liberal. They really ain't that progressive. Don't get me started running the list of things that I could offer you to prove my point about how illiberal and how not progressive they are not. But the point is that I asked them yesterday, Barbara Lee in particular, whether she thought she was too progressive, and she gave a brilliant answer. She says, is this too progressive? when I fight for health care, is this too progressive? I mean, she went Dr. King with it, right? I have a dream, I have a dream, I have a dream. She kept saying, is this too progressive? Is this too progressive? It was a brilliant answer. If you missed it yesterday, check out the podcast of my dialogue with Barbara Lee, a brilliant response to this question I asked yesterday. I asked you, Adam Smith, nice guy, Adam Schiff, rather, nice guy. I consider him a personal friend, but I would not call him a progressive. He is at best a moderate. Is Barbara Lee too progressive for the U.S. Senate?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think that...
I mean, Bernie Sanders is there, but he's one. But he's only one.
He's only one.
Yeah.
And
I mean, there's Sherrod Brown out of Ohio, who's a little bit more. You're from Ohio.
Yeah.
Sherrod Brown from Ohio. Yeah.
I mean, I think that Barbara Lee and Katie Porter, to that extent, do represent a good chunk of voters in this state. I think that Adam Schiff is more palatable to a lot of voters in this state, and I think it's the money is a factor, right? Because in California, it's very expensive to run an election, and he has gotten his face out there. People knew who he was before he started running. But I think when it comes down to actual policies, I think the things that Barbara Lee is talking about are things that voters really care about. I think that for whatever reason, people think that Adam Schiff is a better person to actually implement those policies. I mean, I think that's the quandary, about a lot of the people I think that we elect.
When you consider that Barbara Lee, this black woman out of Oakland that we all know and respect as a true dyed-in-the-wool progressive, when you think about her running for the U.S. Senate and what a difficult time she has had, she's trailed in the polls literally from day one. So it doesn't appear that Barbara Lee's going to pull this off today. I hope she didn't hear me say that, but she's in the same polls I'm looking at.
Yeah.
So it doesn't appear she's going to pull this off, and yet I want to juxtapose that against the fact that Kamala Harris did win in this state some years ago. When you look at Kamala Harris now in the rearview mirror, say nothing of her being vice president, you look at what she was able to do a few years ago that Barbara Lee cannot do now. And I know they're two different people. Yeah. What do you see that I don't see? Or just say what do you see in that frame of how Kamala Harris did pull it off in California and Barbara Lee cannot pull it off in California?
Well, I think first, Kamala Harris held statewide office. I think that's a big thing. Her name, people knew who she was, at least in name.
She'd been Attorney
General, and she was, U.S. Senator as well. I also think that, Kamala Harris isn't as progressive as Barbara Lee as well. And so I think that also plays into the conversation we just had. But I think beyond that, I think there was the process that led us to this point with Barbara Lee running, right? We had, Kamala Harris obviously becoming vice president, a push to keep, quote unquote, keep the seat, put another black woman in the Senate. That didn't happen, obviously. Then that went to Senator Feinstein passing away and the fight over who's going to take that seat. So there was so much back and forth, I think, that led us to the point where we are. And I think the entrance of Adam Schiff, being backed by the backers that he has, the deep-pocketed backers. I think Katie Porter, who also has name recognition. And then there's just a structural issue that black women face, which is this not being able to raise the amount of money to run in a state as expensive as California, which is what we saw in the fundraising totals between Adam Schiff, Katie Porter, and Barbara Lee. I think it's led us to this.
It is Super Tuesday, or not so Super Tuesday as it once was, and yet 16 states are having primaries or caucuses today in this presidential election year. But everybody I've talked to, and Erica Smith from the LA Times says the same. All the data we've seen so far is that there's a low turnout. We could see that number shift today. Because today is actual election day. We won't know the final numbers in any of these races for a day or two because people can vote up until today. Mail-in ballots are even counted after today. So the process has changed. We don't necessarily know on election day later that night who the winners really are, and that's problematic in a lot of ways. People want to know sooner than later. Remember the mayor's race? That took us weeks in LA to figure who the mayor was.
Yeah.
So it's a process that's fraught with all kind of tension. But the point is that it appears at the moment across the country, not just in California, the voter turnout is low, broadly speaking. We'll talk more about that and a great deal more as we talk about Super Tuesday in this country with Erica Smith from the LA Times. I'm Tavis Smiley.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. they sent us straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Wyoming lawmakers have passed a bill that would add regulations to surgical and chemical abortions to the state's last remaining abortion clinic. The new bill, expected to be signed into law this month, would reclassify abortion clinics as ambulatory surgical centers. That would require doctors who perform abortions to be licensed and add criminal penalties for violations. In Massachusetts, the Greater Springfield chapter of the NAACP has filed an official complaint with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education over racial bullying allegations in the Southwick-Tolland-Granville School District. The incidents in the Southwick schools involved racist abuse, including an online slave auction that offered black students for sale. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Robert Half research indicates 9 out of 10 hiring managers are having difficulty hiring. Robert Half is here to help. Their recruiting professionals use proprietary AI to connect businesses with highly skilled talent. At Robert Half, they know talent. Visit roberthalf.com today.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Impressive game for the Lakers Monday night against Oklahoma City. They beat OKC by 12. The Lakers were hot from three-point range. They made 18 of 25. D'Angelo Russell led the Lakers with 26 points. He had 5 of the Lakers' 18 threes. The Lakers are 10-4 in their last 14 games. They're 1 game behind Dallas for the 8th and final playoff spot in the Western Conference. Frustrating loss for the Clippers last night in Milwaukee. They lost by 7. Milwaukee played without 2 starters because of injuries. All-star Giannis Antetokounmpo and Chris Middleton. Damian Lillard stepped up with a game-high 41. Bobby Portis had 28 off the bench. Clippers guard Russell Westbrook has surgery Monday on his fractured left hand. The Clippers medical staff is hopeful that Westbrook will be back in April before the start of the Western Conference playoffs. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Are you interested in catching up on all the latest entertainment news, trending topics, and exciting interviews? I got you. Tune in to The Raw Report with Robin Ayers, Monday through Friday, 6 to 7 p.m. I'm your host, Robin Ayers. Join me every weekday with some of the best entertainment contributors in the business as we break down what's going on, who's got next, and what not to miss. Only on The Raw Report with Robin Ayers.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA reminds you that when we fight, we win, and we don't black down. LA Community Action Network, or LA CAN, was formed in 1999 when 25 residents of downtown LA came together and acknowledged the problems that existed in their community and made a commitment to do something about those problems, to stand together, organize, and become a force in the community that demands change. Civil rights and preventing the criminalization of poverty are their core projects. In addition, they take on women's rights, the human right to housing, and healthy food access. LA CAN also has projects focused on economic development, civic participation, voter engagement, and community media. While downtown LA remains their home base, with a particular emphasis on the Skid Row community, in 2007, they expanded their housing and healthy food access work into South Central Los Angeles. LA CAN believes that power for low-income people and people of color is achieved through a large, active, and well-informed member base that utilizes a multitude of methods to advance their messages and goals. If you'd like to join the Los Angeles Community Action Network and organize people to fight back against oppression, please visit cangress.org. That's cangress.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Hey Californians, are you ready to make your home ownership dreams come true? The California Dream for All Shared Appreciation Loan Program might be for you. First-generation homebuyers can get down payment and closing cost assistance along with a first mortgage to help you unlock the door of your new home. Applications open in April, so talk to an approved lender to see if you're eligible. Find out more at calhfa.ca.gov/dream or call 877-922-5432. A message from the California Housing Finance Agency.
If you're an adult in need of an accredited high school diploma, the Los Angeles Public Library can help. You can earn one for free in as few as 5 months online with 24/7 access. You also get a personal academic coach plus special training focused on 9 in-demand industries as well as a resume and cover letter to advance your career. Visit the website at lapl.org/diploma. That's lapl.org/diploma.
We, the people, need change. I am Michelle Chambers, and I am running for state senate to deliver the change we need. More housing, higher wages for workers, fully funded public schools, and mental health services. Planned Parenthood, nurses, classroom teachers, and Democrats, labor unions all agree. Visit michelleforcalifornia.com to learn more. For real change, vote Michelle Chambers by March 5th. Ad paid for by Chambers for Senate 2024.
Who do you trust to get at the truth?
Tavis Smiley.
That's who. The conversation continues right now.
It does indeed on Super Tuesday with Erica D. Smith, columnist for the LA Times. 16 states today with either primaries or caucuses all across the country. And so, in case you've just tuned in, and Erica and I both agree, we were talking earlier, excuse me, that Super Tuesday these days doesn't feel as big as it used to be back in the day. When I was growing up and in college and out of college, I mean, Super Tuesday was a big deal. Super Tuesday would make or break campaigns. Mm-hmm. Super Tuesday, when the results came in, candidates were dropping like flies, right? So people were trying to hold on to get to Super Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Now things have changed. South Carolina moved up earlier on the ballot, and so now black people get a say a little bit earlier, and so things have changed so much over the years. And so Super Tuesday doesn't feel as big as it used to, and particularly in this year, because it is a foregone conclusion at this point, excuse me, that Mr. Trump will be the presumptive nominee for the Republican Party, and Mr. Biden will be the presumptive nominee, or is the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party. So we kind of know how this thing is going down. It's a rematch nobody wants. We'll talk about that with Eric in a moment. But things seem to be, pretty well secured at this point for who's going to be in what seat, or certainly in the finals for whatever race we're talking about. So people seem to be attentive on the one hand. That's what our numbers indicate here at the station in LA. They're attentive, they're paying attention, they're listening to the podcast of the interviews that we post, and yet the turnout appears to be low. I wonder whether I want to phrase this right, Erica. I wonder whether the disinterest in top of the ballot is having an impact down ballot. Usually it's the other way around. Mm-hmm. That we have interest, if you have interest at the top of the ballot, then it has interest down ballot. Mm-hmm. If you're running in a presidential election year and your guy is winning the presidency, there's a good chance he's got some coattails, and you may come on in with him. But when there's disinterest at the top of the ballot, I wonder whether it works the same way, where there's disinterest down ballot, that the whole electorate all across the country is just kind of depressed because nobody wants this sequel. Does that make sense as a question?
No, it does. And I think you're right. I mean, I definitely think that's definitely the case in California, where we see the number, at least so far as of this morning, the number of Republican voters kind of outperforming what is normally expected compared to Democratic Party voters. And I think that talks about the lack of enthusiasm around Biden in particular. Not only has it been more or less decided that he's going to be our nominee, but people just aren't that excited about him running again, and he's facing drama from all fronts at this point from so many communities. And I think that's translating down ballot, unfortunately for some of the Democrats on the ticket. And obviously, while we have school board races, we have a couple city council races, that doesn't seem, at least here in LA, I don't know if that's really been enough to drum up support up the ballot. And as you said, it's down across all the states in Super Tuesday so far.
Yep. The other data that I'm looking at, again, across the country, voter turnout appears to be low, and that's, again, somewhat shocking because it is a
presidential election year. You expect low turnout in a midterm year. You expect higher turnout in a presidential election year. Hence the question I just posed as to whether or not our disinterest in this sequel is just depressing down ballot everything across the country. And I think Eric and I both agree that it probably is, number one. But number two, specifically, we know that young voters, the turnout and the interest in this campaign from young voters has waned. Some of that across the country has to do with their disappointment with Joe Biden on the Israel-Gaza situation. Kamala Harris finally gets around on Sunday in Selma to saying, we need a ceasefire immediately. And don't get it twisted. I was telling somebody last night, the fact that she did that in Selma, in front of some black people who they know have been feeling a certain way about this policy, black people, young people, the timing of her saying ceasefire now in Selma, in front of a bunch of black folk, be very clear why that venue and that place was where she chose to make that particular statement for the first time. But the point I'm pressing toward is the low voter turnout, it appears at the moment with the young voters. How are you reading that?
I mean, I think, like you said, is disappointment particularly with Democrats and with Biden administration. And I think, and it's about Gaza, but I think it's also about many other things, about the economy, about climate, about even student loans. And the Biden administration would counter and say, well, we've done some work on student loans, we've done some work on climate. But, younger voters, A, either don't know about that because the messaging has not been great, or B, they don't feel like it's enough and it hasn't been transformative enough. And so I don't think there's just a lot of reasons for voters probably under 30 to really go to the ballots. At least that's the perception. And I've talked, just being out and about talking to folks, that's what I've heard. And I think there's a lot of interest in these third-party candidates that are talking more towards them. And of course, that freaks out the Democratic Party and the Republican Party to an extent. But I think that has led a lot to what we're seeing on this primary, which is just lack of enthusiasm in general across the electorate, but particularly for younger voters.
Let me pivot to something that we're not talking about on the ballot today, but will be likely come November. And I'm raising this because all across the country, everybody knows Gavin Newsom. They saw him in the debate with Ron DeSantis on Fox News. They've seen him, basically shadow campaigning across the country. Everybody knows Gavin wants to be president. There's no question about that. And the country knows that he survived a recall here in California. And now there's another recall that's gaining steam to get Gavin Newsom out of office. What is it about Gavin Newsom that keeps leading to all these recalls?
Well, I guess this time around, it's the fact that he wants to be president is part of the driver of the fact that we're trying to recall him again. I think that, Newsom is, as you said earlier, is not, that liberal, but he does have a way, he can land a line, and he is ambitious, and he is not afraid of going on Fox News or kind of, rumbling with Republicans, which is, I think, what a lot of Democrats are really yearning to see these days. And so the fact that he's willing to do that, the fact that he's such a national figure, and frankly, the fact that the Republican Party in California is in such a miserable state, I think they're looking to score some points, and Gavin Newsom's a very big target.
Yeah. Yesterday on this program, and I'm going to ask Miles to pull it up from yesterday. We did this yesterday. I want you to get your take on it. And there's a particular reason why I want to ask you about this. I did a commentary on the program yesterday, and I won't talk about it anymore until you hear it, in case you missed it. But when you hear it, I want to get Erica's thoughts on it. I will say a bit more about it. So I did a commentary yesterday, and the title of the commentary is "Whose Fault Is It?" Whose fault is it? I'll unpack what I mean by that. Whose fault is it? When we come forward, we'll play the commentary from yesterday and get Erica's take on it. You're listening to Erica D. Smith, columnist for the LA Times, on Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Tavis Smiley. Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, And I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
Hey, I have a secret. I use Secret Whole Body Deodorant because more than just my armpits stink.
Oh, can I use it where my bra rubs under my...
Oh, yeah.
And what about down there? You know, my...
Totally. 4 out of 5 gynecologists would recommend it. So I tried it, and now I get 72 hours of freshness from my pits to my...
Ooh, I love that it's a spray.
Me too. And it comes in sticks and creams, too. Go get your Secret Whole Body Deodorant.
Politics has become so messy lately, it's hard to find a reason to be hopeful. Hi, my name is Shakira. I'd like to tell you why Adam Schiff gives me hope. My parents raised me to take my right to vote seriously, so I try to stay on top of what's going on. I saw Adam Schiff lead the impeachment and insurrection hearings. He seemed like someone I could believe in. Then I actually met him at the MLK parade in South Central LA this year. Adam listened. He cared. I got to see who he is. He understands the struggle we have with the cost of living, all the parents working extra shifts and taking second jobs to get by. He gets a threat to our democracy and our freedoms. Adam Schiff knows how tough things really are for a lot of us, and I believe he's going to do something about it. It gives me hope, but hope isn't enough. We need to vote for Adam Schiff for Senate.
I'm Adam Schiff, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Schiff for Senate.
If you're looking for the most epic place on Earth, let's start at the base of a massive waterfall. Then trek through the thick jungle. Then climb to the peak of a snowy mountaintop. Then once you get there, keep going. Because with intelligent 4x4 and 7 drive modes and a Nissan Pathfinder, the search is the real adventure.
Available feature. Intelligent 4x4 cannot prevent collisions or provide enhanced traction in all conditions. Always monitor traffic and weather conditions.
Smart talk for curious people just like you. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Here's the commentary from yesterday that I want to play right quick and get Erica Smith's response to it. Play it, Mouse. The blind boys of Alabama. Let me start by saying I do not believe President Joe Biden has been given the credit he deserves for what he has accomplished against some pretty strong headwinds. Respect or no respect, I also do not believe that at this point President Biden has any interest or intent to step down. To be clear, I am not now, nor have I heretofore suggested, that he should stand down. That decision, is the purview of the president and his party. But here's my simple question, given the existential threat that we now face in Donald Trump, knowing he'll be on the ballot in all 50 states. If this Biden-Trump rematch is a fight that nobody wants to see, if a majority of President Biden's 2020 voters now think that he is too old to be effective, if Vice President Kamala Harris is viewed less favorably than President Biden, if over 100,000 voters in a critical primary state like Michigan, which he barely won in 2020, recently voted uncommitted, even as Vice President Harris yesterday finally called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, and if young voters are still losing faith and feeling disaffected, if the president's black numbers are soft at best and a sizable number of black men, rightly or wrongly, are considering options other than President Biden, if independent candidates, including Cornel West, RFK Jr., Jill Stein, and others, are gaining ballot access right now in states all across the country, and if every poll, survey, and study finds the same data, the same concerns about his age and his ability to lead the country effectively, which would seem to indicate a trend, not just a real-time snapshot, not just a media narrative, here is my question. If come November, after all the warning signs hidden in plain sight, President Biden loses this election to Donald Trump, whose fault is it? Who we gonna blame? Erica D. Smith?
You know, let me just say, I hope Biden wins. I will vote for him in November. I won't be happy about it, but I will vote for him.
That makes two of us, by the way. Go ahead.
But, if he loses, it's his fault. I mean, as you said in that monologue, I mean, there has been warning sign after warning sign after warning sign. And, when in 2016, when Hillary Clinton ran against Donald Trump, there were similar warning signs that the Democratic Party did not want to listen to because, it was confident and it thought it had it. And we saw what happened. And at some point, we have to listen to voters. And yes, polls are not exact and they can be wrong. But there's a certain point where there are so much information coming from so many different sources saying the same thing that you have to actually acknowledge the fact that there might be some truth to it. And from what I've seen from the Democratic Party thus far, they don't seem to be taking that seriously. And that's scary because of what we're facing on the other end.
Two things. One, I don't think you win elections by telling voters that they are wrong. I don't think you win elections by telling voters that they are wrong, number one. To your point about all the warning signs. And secondly, there's a new book out, and the name escapes me just this fast. I had the guest on the program last week. When you do 3 hours a day with all kinds of authors, you forget stuff. We had two guests on, authors of a new book that's out, and they report for the first time in this book that, speaking of Hillary Clinton, who you mentioned a moment ago, you recall Barack Obama, the first time out, basically convinced Joe not to run, and made it clear that Hillary was his candidate that time around. So Joe Biden sat that race out. He wouldn't be as old now had he run and maybe won then, but Biden said basically, Obama said to Biden, stay out of it. Hillary's going to be my candidate, and that was that. And Biden wasn't happy about that, but he sat down and shut up. Hillary runs, and she loses. In their book, they report that at 1:30 in the morning, Joe Biden, vice president, called the president at the White House and said, see, boss, I told you, nobody likes her. Biden, the vice president, called Obama at the White House at 1:30 in the morning and said, see, I told you, nobody likes her. And so wow. Somebody may be calling Joe Biden. If I die today and my soul be lost, ain't nobody's fault but mine. Our remaining moments with Erica D. Smith when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Seeking the truth. Speaking the truth. This is the Tavis Smiley Show.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminding you that we keep us safe. Pro Football Hall of Famer and urban peace pioneer Jim Brown believed in just that. So he founded the Amera I Can Foundation for Social Change in 1988, focusing on at-risk and high-risk youth in underserved schools and juvenile detention facilities, as well as adult incarceration and reentry initiatives. The core of the Amera I Can program is its 15-chapter life skills curriculum. Mastery of these skills allows individuals to meet their academic potential, conform their behavior to acceptable societal standards, and improve the quality of their lives by equipping them with what they need to confidently and successfully contribute to society. Today, the foundation is led by its president, Monique Brown, who has been actively involved in the organization for more than 25 years. The Amera I Can Foundation continues its work in memory of its founder, actor, philanthropist, and NFL legend Jim Brown. To get involved or make a donation, please visit AmeriICanCommunity.partners. That's AmeriICanCommunity.partners. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
JP Morgan Chase is building on the investments in California and around the country to help close the racial wealth gap and build a more equitable future. As part of JP Morgan Chase commitment, they are taking action to help improve financial wealth and access to banking in the Black community, helping more people open low-cost checking and savings accounts, hosting community seminars with supporting Black-led institutions by building awareness about financial investments, hiring community managers, and opening community center branches like Crenshaw, Inglewood, and downtown LA. Visit today, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Again, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Get the tools to help reach your financial goals. Visit today, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity. Again, jpmorganchase.com/racial equity.
Let's get back to more of Tavis Smiley right now.
Erica Smith and I were just talking in the break. Can I put that on the air?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, what did you say to me during the break?
We're talking about if Biden loses, who they're going to blame. And I said, well, the first people they're going to blame is black folks.
And that's why I'm doing this editorial right now. So in November, if he loses, I can pull this commentary out and tell y'all what I said back in March and why, Erica D. Smith, are they going to blame black people if Joe Biden loses?
Because we are the base. We are the people that always vote for the Democratic Party. And if we don't turn out, then it must be our fault.
That's exactly right. So you heard it here first. I've got the commentary. I've got this this editorial now, as it were, this brief editorial from Erica D. Smith. I'm going to pull both of these out in November if Joe Biden loses this race and just show you how right we were. Because if he loses, you can trust and believe that black folk are going to be the first ones to be blamed for the reason Erica just said. We are the base of the Democratic Party. If these Negroes had shown up,
they just understood.
Yeah. Never mind that we saved him the first time in South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Black women particularly.
Yep.
And saved the democracy in doing so. Never mind we saved you one time so you can be president. If we don't show up this time and you lose, if we show up and you lose, they're still going to blame us. The turnout in the black community, had it been higher, and to your point, white liberals are already yelling at people of color, you must vote for Joe Biden. You got to vote for Joe Biden. So now we're being lectured while we have to do this by a bunch of white liberals.
Yeah. Yeah. And lectured as if we don't understand what Trump being back in office means. And that's just not just black folks, it's Latino folks, it's Muslim and Arab Americans when it comes to the Gaza war. I mean, that's the part that's really kind of insulting, is if people are acting like people who have some reservations about Biden and the Democrats don't understand what it means to have Trump back in office, as if we wouldn't bear the brunt of what that means. To reiterate, I hope Biden does win, but I fear for the politics of this country in many ways if he does not.
Yeah. And the book I referenced earlier, I couldn't think of the name of, it's called The Truce: Progressives, Centrists, and the Future of the Democratic Party. That's the book wherein they break this story that at 1:30 in the morning, Joe Biden calls Barack Obama in the White House and says, see, I told you they didn't like her when Hillary lost to Donald Trump. He was upset all along that Obama had basically told him, stay out of the race. This is Hillary's turn. And so he couldn't wait at 1:30 in the morning to call the president to say, I told you she was going to lose. Nobody likes her. That story is reported in this book called The Truce: Progressives, Centrists, and the Future of the Democratic Party, written by Hunter Walker and Lupe B. Lupin. I love his name, Lupe B. Lupin. And Hunter Walker are the authors of that book called The Truce. Last word to Erica D. Smith. So it's Super Tuesday. What do you expect broadly?
Well, I expect it's going to take days for us to know who actually won Super Tuesday. That's the first thing, particularly here in California. Sadly, unfortunately, because I did vote for Barbara Lee, I do think that Adam Schiff is going to win, and I do think it's going to be a runoff between him and Steve Garvey. I think we already know what to expect from the presidential race. But, I hope that whatever the takeaway from Super Tuesday is, that the Democratic Party in particular takes this and understands that there is some reservation among voters, and to try to really communicate and do some better messaging and for voters so there is more excitement in November, because I'd hate to see this kind of turnout or even this kind of, lack of energy by the end of the year, because we need people to come out and vote.
The aforementioned Adam Schiff is on the phone line right now, and when we come forward in the second hour of Tavis Smiley, we'll commence hour two in conversation with Congressman Adam Schiff. You all know him across the country as the guy who led the impeachment hearings against then President Donald Trump in the House. He's now the front runner here in California, as Erica Smith of the LA Times just said, to be likely in a runoff with Steve Garvey, former Dodger great. So we'll commence hour 2 in dialogue with Adam Schiff when we come forward. For now, we say thank you to LA Times columnist Erica D. Smith for this first hour. Erica, appreciate you. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest. Expected to be signed into law this month would reclassify abortion clinics as ambulatory surgical centers.